Thanks a lot for coming in.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Something about this community appeals to you?
This is a wonderful place to live.
For Kelowna Now, this is Camp Mulgat. And we're joined by Michelle Nowakowski from the Elizabeth Fry Society. So we've finally heard the results of this RCMP review that started locally and wound up being a sort of federally mandated review of how they've been handling these complaints of sexual assault. Are you satisfied with the outcome?
I'm happy about the outcome. What we were asking for was training, better training for the patrol officers and for a specialized unit, because that was the biggest part of the problem, was misunderstanding about how trauma affects the brain and how a sexual assault survivor will come forward. And so I think this in the long run will make a big difference.
The other thing that we heard when the mayor sort of came out with the report on this was that some of the cases were miscoded in some way, and that it almost made it sound like this was in fact a statistical error and not really an error in how they were pursuing cases. Was that an adequate excuse for what we initially thought were numbers that were out of line?
Well, it's a bit of a misnomer, miscoding. The unfounded code, the definition of unfounded is that there's actually no evidence, or there actually is evidence to say that this crime never happened. And so I don't know about the Kelowna files, but nationally they found that a lot of them that were coded to unfounded were actually not investigated, or there just wasn't enough evidence to corroborate. So it was miscoded, but it was also, an impact on survivors. That
Right. So that didn't really explain away the problem. So, but
Right.
on the good news side of it, 12 local cases that had been set aside, code them however you want, weren't getting investigated, are now being brought forward for reinvestigation.
Yes.
That must be great news for you.
I'm really happy to hear that. Now, not all survivors may want to go through that again, and so they may not end up all with a full investigation, but their opportunity is there, and I'm really glad to see
Right,
that.
an opportunity to maybe seek justice. Mm-hmm. And I take it that it goes beyond Kelowna, that there may be some other communities, other detachments where there, while this has been going on, that there's been additional reviews going on, so there's cases all over the place that might be getting a fresh set of eyes?
I understand that's going on, that this isn't a problem that's just Kelowna, it's all across Canada.
Right.
Sexual assault has historically been a problematic crime. It's difficult to investigate. Some people aren't comfortable with the intimacy of it and the questioning around it, and it's a difficult crime to investigate. It's private. It's never done in public. There's never fingerprints or those kinds of things.
Right. So what do we know about how it's going to look going forward? I only learned along the way when this came up that no, we don't even, in Kelowna, there isn't even a single person who has a department related to sexual assault. Now there will be, and it'll be staffed by members who have at least some specific training for this.
Yes, and training in investigations too, so that they're more experienced than the frontline patrol officers.
So if it's, say, half a dozen people or something, could you see that making a real difference for people?
Yes, I can. The biggest thing that we see, the biggest harm, besides letting perpetrators go free, is the psychological impact on the survivor. It's the most devastating crime next to murder. And when survivors aren't believed, they will take on feeling that it's their fault, that they did something wrong, and it deepens the impact. They can become suicidal. There can be suicide attempts, depressed. It can really destroy somebody's life, change it forever.
So you have contacts within the Kelowna RCMP. What's your sense of how these changes will be accepted by people within the detachment? Or is there resistance to people telling them that things might have been done in a way that isn't the best? Or will they really get on board with some changes?
The people that I've talked to are quite excited about it, and some had been seeking this before any of this came out. There had been work going on about it. So I think we're going to have officers in that unit that really know what they're doing and are dedicated to making a change.
Right. And you would expect the rank and file members to embrace that and be seeking their guidance when cases come forward.
I don't think it's going to happen day one, and I think the change will happen slowly, but I think there will be a culture shift. We've seen it in the RCMP with domestic violence in the last 10, 15 years, and
Right.
I think we're going to go through the same thing with sexual assault.
Now, so you've been on the front lines of being, here being like a critic of the RCMP and how they've handled things, but yet you sound really hopeful that there's some improvements that are on the horizon here.
And I don't see myself as a critic. I see our agency and our staff as advocates. So we support the survivor. It's not that we're watchdogging the RCMP, but we are supporting the survivor, and if there's an issue, we'll help them
Right.
advocate for themselves. But I do feel hopeful, very hopeful, and excited about the next year or so, what's going to be
Right.
happening.
Another thing that I've learned in the course of reporting on this topic is how few of these kinds of cases actually get reported.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of people, a lot of women mostly, are realistic about the fact that maybe the evidence in my case would never be enough to convict somebody, and so that might be one of the reasons they don't go forward. But it sounds like your advice is if a person is emotionally capable of doing it, that they should, that there's lots of reasons to go forward, even if it doesn't lead to a conviction.
That's right.
So
That's right.
talk about that a
Because
bit.
you never know, and I don't know, and they won't know, whether there are pieces of what you tell the officer that come up when they put them in their database and that are similar. And you might be supporting somebody else who reported a year ago or 2 years ago for the same person.
Right.
But I really think survivors should get emotional support and make sure they're well supported before they go forward, whether it's coming to us or whether it's having their best friend who's rooting for them and there to talk with and cry with, and
But hold
not
on,
to do
but
alone.
aren't people supposed to, immediately after it happens, doesn't that give the police the best chance to gather the evidence?
That's the very best. Yes.
So there's no time to touch base with the Fry Society, is there, between the time an incident happens and going to the police? How does that?
It depends on the incident. Calls we get are someone who's woken up in a strange hotel room who's been drugged at a bar
My
and
goodness.
doesn't even know it's happened at that point. Like, there are lots of people that tell somebody else first and kind of talk through it to see, am I crazy? Am I reading this wrong? Did this really happen? Most people don't go right away unless it's a stranger assault and something violent.
Right. So it sounds like there's work to be done to make more people, more women usually, feel safe and supported to go ahead with their complaints.
Yes, absolutely.
And I guess changes at the RCMP level might help give people more confidence about going through that.
Absolutely. I think they'll have to see change, but I believe we will see change.
Terrific. Well, thanks for giving us your take on it.
Thank
Michelle
you.
Nokowski from the Fry Society, and thank you for watching Kelowna Now.